In this video, we'll discuss non-metal ion formation. Before we go ahead with that, let me quickly remind you what an ion is. An ion is a charged particle that is formed when a neutral atom loses or gains electrons. Now, when a neutral atom loses electrons, it forms a positive ion because some negative charge is left the atom. When it gains electrons, when a neutral atom gains electrons, we get a negative ion. And what we see is that nonmetals generally form negative ions. Let's find out why. So let's take a few examples to understand this. Oxygen, a nonmetal, has an electronic configuration of 2, 6. Now, we know that if any atom is able to get the electronic configuration of some noble gas, it would become stable, right? So let's list out a few noble gases along with the electronic configurations. Think about it. Which noble gas do you think oxygen would want to become like? Yes, oxygen would want to become like neon. Why is that? Because oxygen has an electronic configuration of 2, 6. If it can somehow get the electronic configuration of 2, 8, it becomes stable, right? So if an oxygen atom gains 2 electrons, right, it would get a charge of -2 and it would become an oxygen ion of 2- charge. But it would get an electronic configuration of 2, 8, and that is exactly like neon, right? And that would make it stable. So the oxygen 2- ion is pretty stable. Okay, great. Now let's move on to something like, say, chlorine. Chlorine has an electronic configuration of 2, 8, 7, right? Which noble gas do you think this would want to become like? Exactly, argon is the closest noble gas, right? If chlorine was able to gain 1 electron, it would become a chlorine -1 ion, right? And it would now have an electronic configuration of 288. Why is that? When this 1 electron is added to the chlorine atom, it goes and sits in the outermost shell and adds to the electrons in the outermost shell, and this chlorine -1 ion has an electronic configuration of 288, and this is identical to the electronic configuration of argon, so the chlorine -1 ion is stable, right? Let me give you another example. Nitrogen has an electronic configuration of 2, 5. Nitrogen would want to become like neon. Why? Because if it was able to gain 3 electrons, it would now get an electronic configuration of 2, 8, right? 2, 8. Why? Let me just go back and show you. These 3 electrons that we're adding to nitrogen would get added to the outermost shell. Thus, the outermost shell would have a total number of electrons of 5, 3, which is 8, right? And mind you, this is the nitrogen 3- ion. Okay, great. Let's pick up our last example, fluorine. Fluorine has an electronic configuration of 2, 7. This would also want to become like neon. If it were to gain 1 electron, it would become a fluorine -1 ion with a charge -1, and this one gained electron would go and sit in the outermost shell, and our fluorine -1 ion would have an electronic configuration of 2, 8, exactly like neon's electronic configuration, and thus fluorine- ion would be stable, right? Now you can do this with anything. If you notice, there's a pattern here, which is very common. Often you need 8 electrons in the outermost shell, right? You need to complete your octet to become stable, right? Okay, and of course, if you're becoming like helium, you need to complete your duplet. Okay, now let me just give you a final quick summary. If you notice the magnitude of charge on each of these stable ions, right? The magnitude of charge on each of these stable ions tends to be equal to the valency exhibited by these particular atoms. Oxygen has a valency of 2, right? Fluorine has a valency of 1. Nitrogen has a valency of 3. Fluorine has a valency of 1, right? So it fits in perfectly just the way we saw for metals. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.